It's very much dominated the build-up towards this meeting. The fact that this reform meeting of the World Trade Organization would be taking place without China, without the United States, of course, the world's two largest economies, who, of course, also find themselves in a trade dispute as well. So really much the focus on these 12 nations plus the European Union to draw up new plans towards bringing about reform within the WTO, and a real admission from the WTO today that the current situation is unsustainable and that urgent action is now required. A gathering of global trade ministers to discuss the future of the World Trade Organization, but without the United States and China. The representatives from 12 countries and the EU had been described as a small group of like-minded trade diplomats. Their focus, developing a vision for a modernized and strengthened WTO.
The current situation at the WTO is no longer sustainable, and action must be taken. We recognize that we are in the process of setting the table for a larger effort, broadening to all members, and that effort must include the United States and China.
The meeting follows threats by US President Donald Trump that he may pull the US out of the WTO altogether, claiming the WTO system for settling disputes between member states has treated the US very badly. The WTO reaffirmed the settlement system as a central pillar of the organization, but say improvements need to be made.
We have to engage with the United States for obvious reasons. The United States has said that they're not happy with the WTO. We want to engage them in ways that I hope will lead to a common understanding of what's in the interests of all the nation states of the WTO.
The meeting also takes place against a backdrop of heightened trade tensions between China and the US. A number of ministers here hope that will be resolved by the time of the next reform meeting this January.
What we hope out of this discussion is that by being proactive in presenting pathways forward for reform and options for the future around the World Trade Organization, that does engage the United States, China and every other nation in thinking about how to move the WTO forwards.
What is clear from this meeting is the understanding from the WTO that reform is required. That may take time. It may also become more complicated once the rest of the WTO members get involved in that discussion. This then is simply the first step towards reforming the troubled global trading organization. Well, in a statement, the WTO also talked about their real concern over the current trade situation, concern over what they see is the move towards greater protectionism as well. Hence why they're really urging the WTO members here, as well as WTO members that have not been included in this first round of reform talks, that greater reform is required and that action needs to be urgent.
Now, Dan, away from the meeting, there's also been another development for Canada on trade. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, who would have thought a bit of a good news global trade story, perhaps, and that is that we had ratification that Canada has passed the last of the legislative steps towards becoming a member of the Comprehensive Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership. That last bit of legislation that has been passed, it did pass the Senate on Thursday, now has been given royal assent. That should give it now smooth passage through Parliament, and that would mean that Canada would become the first of, among the first of 6 nations to sign up towards this agreement, this trade agreement. And as you can imagine, that here in Ottawa was widely celebrated, especially by the Canadian representatives here.
Moments ago, Canada received royal assent for the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, the CPTPP. I want to thank Senators Marwa and Andrzejczyk for their hard work and my predecessor, François-Philippe Champagne. This places Canada among the first 6, and the process to fully implement the CPTPP gets underway now.
So Canada will be among the first of those 6 nations to sign up towards this trade agreement. The other ones so far, New Zealand, Japan, Mexico and Singapore, with Vietnam and Australia also set to ratify, we expect, sooner rather than later as well. And once agreed, this will become one of the world's largest trading blocs.
All right, thank you for that update. Dan Williams there for us in Ottawa.